The Derfflinger-class was authorized for the 1911 fiscal year as part of the 1906 naval law. The naval law was a set of 5 separate laws passed by the German Empire in 1898, 1900, 1906, 1908, and 1912. These acts, championed by Kaiser Wilhelm II and his Secretary of State for the Navy, Grand Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz, committed Germany to build up a navy capable of competing with the Royal Navy of the United Kingdom. Design work had begun in early 1910 after their British counterparts had begun installing 34.3 centimeter or 13.5 inch guns on their battlecruisers. Senior officers in the German Naval Command conducted that an increase in the caliber of the main battery guns from 28 centimeter or 11 inch to 30.5 centimeters or 12 inch would be necessary. To keep the cost from growing too quickly, the number of guns were reduced from 10 to 8 compared to the earlier sedits, but a more effective superfiring arrangement was adopted. Before we continue, if you are new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any future content. With that being said, let's head back into the video. Built by Boehm and Voss at their shipyard in Hamburg, Derfflinger's keel was laid down in January of 1912. The ship was named for George von Derfflinger, a Prussian field marshal during the 13 Years' War. She was to have been launched on the 14th of June, 1913, and at the launching ceremony, the German General August von Mackensen gave a speech. The wooden sledges upon which the ship rested became jammed. The ship moved only 30 to 40 centimeters, or 12 to 16 inches. A second attempt was successful on the 12th of July, 1913. A crew composed of dockyard workers took the ship around the Scuttled to Kiel in early 1914. There, she would complete fitting out. Derfflinger was 210.4 meters long overall, with a beam of 29 meters and a draft of 9.2 meters. She displaced 26,600 tons normally, and up to 31,200 tons at full load. The ship had a crew of 44 officers and 1,608 enlisted men. In early August of 1915, a derrick was mounted amidships, and tests with the Hansa Brandenburg W seaplanes were conducted. Derfflinger was propelled by 2 pairs of high and low pressure steam turbines and drove 4 screw propellers, with steam provided by 14 coal-burning water tube boilers ducted into 2 funnels. Her engines were rated to produce 63,000 metric horsepower for a top speed of 26.5 knots. She could steam for 5,600 nautical miles at a cruising speed of 14 knots. Mounting a main battery of 8 30.5 centimeter or 12 inch guns, Derfflinger was the largest and most powerful German battlecruiser at the time. The ship's secondary battery consisted of 12 15 centimeter or 5.9 inch SKL-54 guns and single casemates in the superstructure, 6 per broadside. For defense against torpedo boats, she carried 8 8.8 centimeter or 3.1 inch SKL 45 guns in individual pivoted mounts on the superstructure, 4 of which were removed in 1916. In addition, 4 8.8 centimeter flat guns were installed amidships. 4 50 centimeter or 19.7 inch submerged torpedo tubes were carried. 1 was located in the bow, 2 in the broadside, and 1 in the stern. Derfflinger was protected by an armor belt that was 300 millimeters or 11.8 inches thick in the central citadel of the ship, where it protected the ammunition magazines and propulsion machinery spaces. Her deck was 30 to 80 millimeters or 1.2 to 3.1 inches thick. In the thicker armored sloping down at the sides to connect the lower edge of the hull, or belt. Her main battery turrets had 270 millimeters or 10.6 inches or inch thick faces. Her secondary casemates received 150 millimeters or 5.9 inches of armor protection. The forward conning tower, where the ship's commander controlled the vessel, was had 300 millimeter walls. As Europe drifted toward war during the July crisis, the German Naval Command issued orders on the 27th, placing the fleet on a state of heightened alert. Though Derfflinger was not yet complete, the Germans feared that the Russian Baltic Fleet would launch a surprise torpedo boat attack at the start of the war, as the Japanese Navy had done to the Russians in the Russo-Japanese War, but the attack did not materialize when World War I broke out the very next day. The ship was placed in commission on the 1st of September to begin sea trials. In late October, the vessel was assigned to the 1st Scouting Group, but damage to the ship's turbines during trials prevented her from joining the unit until the 16th of November. The ship's first wartime operation took place on the 20th of November. Derfflinger sortied with the light cruisers Jutland and Strasbourg and the 5th Torpedo Boat Flotilla for a sweep some 80 nautical miles northwest of the island of Helgoland. They failed to locate any British forces and thereafter returned to port. Derfflinger's first combat operation was a raid on the English coastal towns of Scarborough, Hartlepool, and Whitby. One raid had already been conducted by the battlecruisers of the 1st Scouting Group on the town of Yarmouth in late 1914. Admiral Friedrich von Inkland, the commander of the High Seas Fleet, decided to conduct another raid on the English coast. His goal was to lure a portion of the Grand Fleet into combat where it could be isolated and destroyed. At 03:20 on the 15th of December, Rear Admiral Franz von Hipper, with his flag aboard Seydlitz, departed the Jade estuary. Following Seydlitz were Derfflinger, Motkiv, von Derton, and Blücher, along with the light cruisers Kolberg, Strasbourg, Jutland, and Gardens, and 2 squadrons of torpedo boats. The ship sailed north past the island of Helgoland until they reached the Horn's Reef lighthouse, at which point they turned west towards Scarborough. 12 hours after Hipper left the Jade, the High Seas Fleet departed to provide distant cover. The main fleet consisted of 14 dreadnoughts, 8 pre-dreadnoughts, and a skirting force of 2 armored cruisers, 7 light cruisers, and 54 torpedo boats. On the 16th of August 1914, the German light cruiser Mountgebra had run aground in the Gulf of Finland. The wreck was captured by the Russian Navy, which found codebooks used by the German Navy, along with navigational charts for the North Sea. The Russians passed these documents to the Royal Navy, whose cryptograph unit, Room 40, began decrypting German signals. On the 14th of December, they intercepted messages relating to the planning bombardment of Scarborough. The exact details of the plan were unknown, and the British assumed the High Seas Fleet would remain safely in port. As in the previous bombardment, Vice Admiral David Beatty's 4 battlecruisers, supported by the 3rd Cruiser Squadron and the 1st Light Cruiser Squadron, along with the 2nd Battle Squadron's 6 dreadnoughts, were to ambush Hipper's battlecruisers. During the night of the 15th of December, the main body of the High Seas Fleet encountered British destroyers. Fearing a nighttime torpedo attack, Admiral Intgont ordered the ships to retreat. Hipper was unaware of Ingol's reversal, and so he continued with the bombardment. Upon reaching the British coast, Hipper's battlecruisers split into 2 groups. Derfflinger and von Dertend went south to shell Scarborough and Whitby, while Seeditz, Moltke, and Blücher went north to shell Hartlepool. By 09:45 on the 16th, the 2 groups were reassembled, and they began to retreat eastward. By this time, Beatty's battlecruisers were positioned to block Hipper's chosen withdrawal route, while other forces were en route to complete the encirclement. At 12:25, the light cruisers of the 2nd Scouting Group began to pass through the British forces, searching for Hipper. One of the cruisers of the 2nd Light Cruiser Squadron spotted Jutland and signaled a report to Beatty. At 12:30, Beatty turned his battlecruisers towards the German ships. Beatty presumed the German cruisers were the advanced screening for Hipper's ships. However, those were some 50 kilometers or 31 miles ahead. The 2nd Light Cruiser Squadron, which had been screening for Beatty's ships, detached to pursue the German cruisers. But a misinterpreted signal from the British battlecruisers sent them back to their screening positions. This confusion allowed the German light cruisers to slip away and alert Hipper to the location of the British battlecruisers. The German battlecruisers wheeled to the northeast of the British forces and escaped. Both the British and the Germans were disappointed that they failed to effectively engage their opponents. Admiral Intgont's reputation suffered greatly as a result of his timidity. Moltke's captain was furious. He said Intgont had turned back because he was afraid of 11 British destroyers, which could have been eliminated. Under the present leadership, we will accomplish nothing. The official German history criticized Ingol for failing to use his light forces to determine the size of the British fleet, stating he decided on a measure which not only seriously jeopardized his advance forces off the English coast, but also deprived the German fleet of a signal and certain victory. In early January of 1915, the German Naval Command became aware that British ships were reconnoitering in the Dogger Bank area. Admiral Ingol was initially medicated to attempt to destroy these forces because the 1st Scouting Group was temporarily weakened while von Dertend was in dry dock for periodic maintenance. Richard Ekman, the chief of staff of the High Seas Fleet, insisted on the operation, and so Intgen relent and ordered Hipper to take his battlecruisers to Dodger Bank. On the 23rd of January, Hipper sortied with Sidious in the lead, followed by Moltke, Derfflinger, and Blücher, along with light cruisers Granitz, Lowestoft, Scotland, and Coburg, and 19 torpedo boats from the 5th Flotilla and the 2nd and 18th half flotillas. Granitz and Scotland were assigned to the forward screening, while Coburg and Lowestoft were assigned to the starboard and port, respectively. Each light cruiser had a half flotilla of torpedo boats attached. Again, interception and decryption of the German wireless system signals played an important role, although they were unaware of the exact plans. The choreographers of Room 40 deducted that Hipper would be conducting an operation in the Dodger Bank area to counter Betty's 1st battlecruiser squadron, Rear Admiral Archibald Moore's 2nd battlecruiser squadron, and Commodore William Goodenough's 2nd light cruiser squadron were to rendezvous with Commodore Reynolds Tyrwitz Hartwich force at 0800 hours on the 24th of January, approximately 48 kilometers north of the Dodger Bank. At 08:14, Coburg spotted the light cruiser Aurora and several destroyers from the Hartwich force. Aurora challenged Coburg with a searchlight, at which point Coburg attacked Aurora and scored 2 hits. Aurora returned fire and scored 2 hits on Coburg in retaliation. Hipper immediately turned his battlecruisers towards the gunfire, when, almost simultaneously, Scotland spotted a large mountain of smoke to the northwest of her position. This was identified as a number of large British warships steaming towards Hipper's ships. Hipper turned south to flee, but was limited to 23 knots, which was the maximum speed of the older armored cruiser Blücher. The pursuing British battlecruisers were steaming at 27 knots, and quickly caught up to the German ships. At 09:52, the battlecruiser Lion opened fire on Blücher from a range of approximately 18,300 meters. Shortly thereafter, Queen Mary and Tiger began firing as well. At 10:09, the British guns made their first hit on Blücher. 2 minutes later, the German ships began returning fire, primarily concentrated on Lion, from a range of 16,500 meters. At 10:23, Lion was struck on the waterline, which tore a hole in the side of the ship and flooded a coal bunker. At 10:30, New Zealand, the 4th ship in Betty's line, came within range of Blücher and opened fire. By 10:35, the range had closed to 16,000 meters, at which point the entire German line was within the effective range of the British warships. Betty ordered his battlecruisers to engage their German counterparts. Confusion aboard Tiger led to the captain to believe he was to fire on Sidious, which left Moltke able to fire without distraction. During this period of the battle, Derfflinger was hit once, but the shell did only minor damage. 2 armor plates in the hull were forced inward, and some of the protective coal bunkers were flooded. At 10:40, one of Lion's 34-centimeter shells struck at Sidious, causing nearly catastrophic damage that knocked out both rear turrets and killed 159 men. The executive officer ordered both magazines to be flooded to avoid a flash fire that would have destroyed the ship. By this time, the German battlecruisers had zeroed in on Lion, scoring repeated hits. At 11:01, a 28-centimeter shell from Zetland struck Lion and knocked out two of her dynos. At 11:18, two of Derfflinger's 12-inch shells hit Lion, one of which struck the waterline and penetrated the belt, allowing seawater to enter the port feed tank. Lion had to turn off its engines due to seawater contamination, and as a result, fell out of the line. By this time, Blücher was severely damaged after having been pounded by shells. The chase ended when there were several reports of U-boats ahead of the British ships. Betty quickly ordered evasive maneuvers, which allowed the German ships to increase the distance to their pursuers. At this time, Lion's last operational dyno failed, which dropped her speed to 15 knots. Betty, in the stricken Lion, ordered the remaining battle cruisers to engage the enemy's rear, but signal confusion caused the ships to solely target Blücher, allowing Moltke, Seyditz, and Derfflinger to escape. Blücher was hit with more than 70 shells from the British battlecruisers over the course of the battle. The severely damaged ship capsized and sank at approximately 13:10. By the time Betty regained control of the ship, after having bombarded Princess Royal, the German ships had too great a lead for the British to catch them. At 13:50, he broke off the chase. Derfflinger also took part in the bombardment of Yarmouth and Lowestoft on the 24th through the 25th of April, 1916. Hipper was away on sick leave, so the German ships were under the command of Friedrich Boedicker. Derfflinger, her newly commissioned sister ship Lützow, and the veterans Moltke, Seyditz, and von Derten left the Jade Estuary at 10:55 on the 24th of April. They were supported by a screening force of 6 light cruisers and 2 torpedo boat flotillas. The heavy units in the High Seas Fleet, under the command of Admiral Reinhard Scheer, sailed at 13:40, with the objective to provide distant support for Boedicker's ships. The British Admiralty was made aware of the German sortie through the interception of German wireless signals, and deployed the Grand Fleet at 15:50. At 1400 hours, Boedicker's ships had received a position off Norway, or reached a position off of Norway, at which point he turned his ships northward to avoid the Dutch observers on the island of Jutland. At 15:38, Seyditz struck a naval mine, which tore a 15-meter hole in her hull, just abaft the starboard broadside torpedo tube, allowing 1,300 tons of water to enter the ship. Seyditz returned back with the screen of light cruisers at a speed of 15 knots. The 4 remaining battlecruisers turned south immediately in the direction of Nording to avoid further naval damage or further mine damage. By 1600 hours, Seyditz was clear of immediate danger, so the ship stopped to allow Boedicker to disembark. The torpedo boat V-28 brought Boedicker to Lützow. At 04:50 on the 25th of April, the German battlecruisers were approaching Lowestoft when the light cruisers Rostock and Elbing which had been covering the southern flank, spotted the light cruisers and destroyers of Commodore Terwitz's Hartwich force. Boudicca refused to be distracted by the British ships, and instead trained his ship's guns on Lowestoft. At a range of approximately 13,000 meters, the German battlecruisers destroyed two 150 millimeters or 6-inch shore batteries and inflicted other damage to the town, including the destruction of some 200 houses. At 05:20, the German raiders turned north towards Yarmouth, which they reached by 05:42. The visibility was so poor that the German ships fired one salvo each, with the exception of Derfflinger, which fired 14 rounds from her main battery. The German ships turned back south, and at 04:47 or 05:47 encountered for the second time the Hartwich force, which had by then engaged by the six light cruisers of the screening force. Boudicca's ships opened fire from a range of 12,000 meters. Turtlet immediately turned his ships around and fled south, but not before the cruiser Conquest sustained severe damage. Due to reports of British submarines and torpedo attacks, Boudicca broke off the chase and turned back east towards the High Seas Fleet. At this point, Scheer, who had been warned of the Grand Fleet's sortie from Scapa Flow, turned back towards Germany. Almost immediately after the Lowestoft raid, Scheer began planning another foray into the North Sea. He had initially intended to launch the operation in mid-May, but the mine damage to Sititz had proven difficult to repair, and Scheer was unwilling to embark on a major raid without his battlecruiser forces at full strength. At noon on the 28th of May, the repair to Sititz were finally completed, and the ship returned to the first scouting group. Derfflinger and the rest of Hipper's first scouting group battlecruisers lay anchored in the outer Jade roadstead on the night of the 30th of May. At 0200 hours CET, the ships steamed out towards the Stuttgart at a speed of 16 knots. Derfflinger was the second ship in the line of five, ahead of Sititz, and to the rear of Lützow, which had by that time became the group flagship. The second scouting group consisted of the light cruisers Frankfurt, Boudicca's flagship Wiesbaden, Wiesbaden, Pillau, and Elbing, and 30 torpedo boats of the 2nd, 6th, and 9th flotillas, accompanying Hipper's battlecruisers. An hour and a half later, the High Seas Fleet left the Jade. The force was composed of 16 dreadnoughts. The High Seas Fleet was accompanied by the 4th Scouting Group, composed of the light cruisers Stegnitz, München, Hamburg, Frontload, Stromglück, and 31 torpedo boats of the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th flotillas, led by the light cruiser Rostock. The 6 pre-dreadnoughts of the 2nd Battle Squadron had departed from the Elbe roads at 02:45 and rendezvoused with the battle fleet at 0500 hours. Shortly before 1600 hours, Hipper's forces encountered the 6 ships of Vice Admiral Beatty's 1st and 2nd battlecruiser squadrons. The German ships were the first to open fire at a range of approximately 14,000 meters. When the British ships began returning fire, confusion among the British battlecruisers resulted in Moltke being engaged by both New Zealand and Tiger. The British rangefinders had misread the range to their German targets, and so the first salvos fired by the British ships fell a mile past the German battlecruisers. Due to the errors in British communication, Derfflinger was not yet engaged during the first 10 minutes of the battle. Derfflinger's gunnery officer, George von Hayes, later remarked, "By some mistake, we were being left out. I laughed grimly, and now I began to engage our enemy with complete calm, as at gunnery practice, and with continually increasing accuracy." At 17:03, the British battlecruiser HMS Invincible exploded after 15 minutes of gunfire from von Derton. Shortly thereafter, the second half of Beatty's forces, the 4 Queen Elizabeth-class battleships of the 5th Battle Squadron, came into range and began firing at von Derton and Moltke. Following severe damage inflicted by Lützow on Lyon, Derfflinger lost sight of the British ship, and so at 17:16 transferred or fired to the Queen Mary. Siditz was also engaging in Queen Mary, and under the combined fire of the 2 battlecruisers, Queen Mary was hit repeatedly in quick succession. Observers on New Zealand and Tiger, the ships behind and ahead, respectively, reported 3 shells from a salvo of 4 struck the ship at the same time. 2 more hits followed, and a gigantic explosion erupted amidships. A billowing cloud of black smoke poured from the burning ship, which had broken in 2. The leading ships of the German High Seas Fleet had, by 1800 hours, come within effective range of the British battlecruisers and Queen Elizabeth-class battleships, and had begun trading shots with them. Between 1809 and 1819, Derfflinger was hit by a 38-centimeter or 15-inch shell from either Barham or Valiant. At 1855, Derfflinger was hit again. This shell struck the bow and tore a hole that allowed some 300 tons of water to enter the warship. Shortly after 1900 hours, the German cruiser Whitby had become disabled by a shell from the battlecruiser's Invincible. The German battlecruisers made a 16-point turn to the northeast and made for the crippled cruiser at high speed. At 1915, they spotted the British armored cruiser Defense, which had joined the attack on Whitby. Hipper initially hesitated, believing the ship was the German cruiser Lowestoft, but in 1916, Sir C. Harter, Lutzow's commanding officer, ordered his ship's guns to fire. The other German battlecruisers and battleships joined in the melee. Defense was struck by several heavy-caliber shells from the German ships. One salvo penetrated the ship's ammunition magazine, and a massive explosion destroyed the cruiser. By 1924, the 3rd Battlecruiser Squadron had formed up with Beatty's remaining battlecruisers ahead of the German line. The leading British ships spotted Lützow and Derfflinger and began to fire on them. In the span of 8 minutes, the battlecruisers Invincible scored 8 hits on Lützow. In return, both Lützow and Derfflinger concentrated their fire on their antagonist, and at 1931, Derfflinger fired her final salvo at Invincible. Shortly thereafter, the forward magazine detonated and the ship disappeared in a series of massive explosions. By 1930, the High Seas Fleet, which was, by that point, pursuing the British ship battlecruisers, had not yet encountered the Grand Fleet. Scheer had been considering retiring his forces before darkness exposed his ships to torpedo boat attack. He had not yet made his decision when his leading battleships encountered the main body of the Grand Fleet. This development made it impossible for Scheer to retreat. For doing so would have sacrificed the slower pre-dreadnought battleships of the 2nd Battle Squadron. If he chose to use his dreadnoughts and battlecruisers to cover their retreat, he would have subjected his strongest ships to overwhelming British fire. Instead, Scheer ordered his ships to turn 16 points to starboard, which would bring the pre-dreadnoughts to the relative safety of the disengaging side of the German battle line. Derfflinger and the other battlecruisers followed the move, which put them astern of the leading German battleship Koenig. Hipper's badly battered ships gained a temporary moment of respite, and uncertainty over the exact location and course of Scheer's ships led Admiral Jellicoe to turn his ships eastward towards what he thought was the likely path of the German retreat. The German fleet was instead sailing west, but Scheer ordered the second 16-point turn, which reversed course and pointed his ships at the center of the British fleet. The German fleet also came under intense fire from the British line, and Scheer sent Derfflinger, Seydlitz, and Moltke and von Derten at high speed towards the British fleet, in an attempt to disrupt their formation and gain time for his main force to retreat. By 2017, the German battlecruisers had closed to within 7,000 meters of Colossus, at which point Scheer directed the ships to engage the lead ship of the British line. 3 minutes later, the German battlecruisers turned in retreat, covered by a torpedo boat attack. A pause in the battle at dusk, approximately at 2:20 to 21:10, allowed Derfflinger and the other German battlecruisers to cut away wreckage that interfered with the main guns, extinguishing fires, repair the fire control and signal equipment, and prepare the searchlights for nighttime action. During this period, the German fleet reorganized into a well-ordered formation in reverse order. When the German light forces encountered the British screen shortly at 2100 hours, the renewed gunfire gained Beatty's attention, so he turned his gunfire, or his battlecruisers, westward. At 2109, he sighted the German battlecruisers and drew to within 7,800 meters before opening fire at 2120. In the ensuing melee, Derfflinger was hit several times. At 2134, a heavy shell struck her last operational gun turret and pulled it out of action. The German ships returned fire with every gun available, and at 2132, hit both Lion and Princess Royal in the darkness. The maneuvering of the German battlecruisers forced the leading 1st Battle Squadron to return westward to avoid collision. This brought the pre-dreadnoughts of the 2nd Battle Squadron directly between the two lines of battlecruisers. In doing so, this prevented the British ships from pursuing their German counterparts when they turned southward. The British battlecruisers opened fire on the old battleships. The German ships turned southwest to bring all their guns to bear against the British ships. This engagement lasted only a few minutes before Admiral Ludwig turned his ships 8 points to starboard. The British unexpectedly did not pursue. Close to the end of the battle, at 03:55, Hipper transmitted a report to Admiral Scheer informing him of the tremendous damage to ships had suffered. By that time, Derfflinger and von Derten had only 2 operational guns each. Moltke was flooded with 1,000 tons of water. Lützow had sunk, and Seydlitz was severely damaged. Lützow had been sunk, and Seydlitz was severely damaged. Hipper reported first scouting group was therefore no longer of any value for a serious engagement, and was consequently directed to return to harbor by the commander-in-chief, while he himself determined to wait developments of Horn's Reef with the battle fleet. During the course of the battle, Derfflinger was hit 17 times by heavy caliber shells and 9 times by secondary guns. She was in dock for repairs until the 15th of October. Derfflinger fired 385 shells from remaining batteries, another 235 rounds from her secondary guns, and 1 torpedo. Her crew suffered 157 men killed and another 26 men wounded. This was the highest casualty rate on any ship not sunk during the battle. Because of her stalwart resistance at Jutland, the British nicknamed her the Iron Dog. After returning to the fleet, Derfflinger conducted battle readiness training in the Baltic Sea for the rest of October and all of November. By this time, the Germans had abandoned offensive use of the surface fleet, favoring instead the U-boat campaign against British merchant shipping. Derfflinger and the rest of the fleet were used to defend German waters so the U-boats could continue to operate. During the Second Battle of German Bight in November of 1917, Derfflinger sailed from port to assist the German light cruisers of the Second Scouting Group. But by the time she and the other battlecruisers arrived on the scene, the British raiders had fled northward. On the 20th of April, 1918, Derfflinger covered a mine-laying operation off Trutland. Beginning in late 1917, the High Seas Fleet had begun to conduct raids on the supply convoys between Britain and Norway. In October and December, German cruisers and destroyers intercepted and destroyed 2 British convoys to Norway. This prompted Betty, now the commander-in-chief of the Grand Fleet, to detach several battleships and battlecruisers to protect the convoys. This presented to Scheer the opportunity for which he had been waiting the entire war, the chance to isolate and eliminate a portion of the Grand Fleet. Hipper planned the operation. The battlecruisers, including Derfflinger, and their escorting light cruisers and destroyers, would attack one of the large convoys, while the rest of the High Seas Fleet stood by, ready to attack the British battleship squadron. At 0500 hours on the 23rd of April, 1918, the German fleet departed from the Schelling roadstead. Hipper ordered wireless transmissions be kept to a minimum to prevent radio interceptions by British intelligence. At 0610, the German battlecruisers had reached a position approximately 60 kilometers northwest of Bergen when Moltke lost their inner starboard propeller, which severely damaged the ship's engines. The crew effected temporary repairs that allowed the ship to steam at 4 knots, but it was decided to take the ship under tow. Despite the setback, Hipper continued northward. By 1400 hours, Hipper's force had crossed the convoy route several times, but had found nothing. At 1410, Hipper turned his ships southward. By 1837, the German fleet had made it back to the defensive minefields surrounding their base. It was later discovered that the convoy had left port a day later than expected by the German planning staff. Derfflinger was to have been taken part in what would have amounted to the death ride of the High Seas Fleet shortly before the end of World War I. The bulk of the High Seas Fleet was to have sorted from its base in Wilhelmshaven to engage the British Grand Fleet. Scheer, by now the Grand Admiral of the fleet, intended to inflict as much damage as possible on the British Navy in order to retain a better bargaining position for Germany, whatever the cost of the fleet. While the fleet was consolidating in Wilhelmshaven, war-weary sailors began deserting en masse. As Derfflinger and von Derten passed it through the locks that separated Wilhelmshaven's inner harbor and roadstead, some 300 men from both ships climbed over the side and disappeared ashore. On the 24th of October 1918, the order was given to sail from Wilhelmshaven. Starting on the night of the 29th of October, sailors mutinied on several battleships. 3 ships from the 3rd Squadron refused to weigh anchor, and the battleships Turgen and Holgund reported acts of sabotage. The order to sail was rescinded in the face of this open revolt. The following month, the German Revolution toppled the monarchy and was quickly followed by the armistice that ended the war. Following Germany's capitulation, the Allies demanded that the majority of the High Seas Fleet be interned in the British naval base at Scapa Flow, pending an ultimate resolution for their fate. On the 21st of November 1918, under the command of Rear Admiral Ludwig von Reuter, the ships that sailed from the base in Germany for the last time. The fleet rendezvoused with the light cruiser Cardiff before meeting a flotilla of 370 British, American, and French warships for the voyage to Scapa Flow. Once the ships were interned, their breech blocks were removed, which disabled their guns. The fleet remained in captivity during the negotiations and ultimately produced the Versailles Treaty. It became apparent to Reuter that the British intended to seize the German ships on the 21st of June 1919, which was the deadline for which Germany was to have signed the peace treaty. Unaware the deadline had been extended to the 23rd of June, Reuter ordered his ships to be sunk. On the morning of the 21st of June, the British fleet left Scapa Flow to conduct training maneuvers. With the majority of the British fleet away, Reuter transmitted the order to his ships at 11:20. Derfflinger sank at 14:45. The ship was raised in 1939 and was anchored, still capsized, off the island of Riza until 1946, at which point the ship gained the dubious distinction of having spent more time afloat upside down than she had right way up. Derfflinger was then sent to Franklin Port and broke up by 1948. One of the ship's bells was delivered to the German Federal Navy on the 30th of August, 1965, and the other was exhibited outside St. Michael's Roman Catholic Church on the outer Hampstead island of Erskine. And that concludes today's video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do go hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so that you guys do not miss out on any future content. For informational stuff regarding the video, you can either comment down below asking for the stuff, or you can check out the books that you guys see on screen now. Those I used as a massive reference. A way to get those books, if you guys are curious, I have left links to Amazon in order to get those books. I highly recommend the books. They're I used a lot of the information in the video on those. I do truly apologize for the audio being weird in the video. If you guys did not see the announcement and have watched this far to the end, I had a major issue with the audio towards the end of the video, and I truly do apologize for that. So, with that being said, I thank, again, everybody for tuning in. Please, go hit the like button, and, please leave a comment down below if you guys have any questions, concerns, requests, anything like that. Please do leave that down below. If you guys haven't already, please do come join the podcast over on Spotify, and please come join the Patreon over on Patreon. Both are linked down in the description below, as well as my Discord server and my Twitch account. Now, with that being said, again, I thank everybody for tuning in, and I shall see you all in the next video. Peace out.